Countless people who describe profound spiritual awakenings often report something surprising. Death no longer feels like the terrifying end it once did. Instead, it begins to resemble a doorway, a transition, or simply another chapter in a much larger story. This shift is not usually caused by adopting a new belief system. Rather, it often emerges after something within them has already died. That something is what many spiritual traditions call the ego. But why would the death of the ego change how we view physical death? The answer may be far deeper than most people realize. The Swiss psychiatrist Stanislav Grof, one of the founders of transpersonal psychology, spent decades studying non-ordinary states of consciousness through psychedelic research and spiritual experiences. Grof observed that many participants who underwent what he called ego death also experienced a dramatic reduction in their fear of dying. Instead of identifying solely with their personality, they reported feeling connected to something timeless that existed beyond individual identity. This is where the mystery begins. Perhaps we are not afraid of death itself. Perhaps we are afraid of losing the identity we mistake for ourselves. The British philosopher and spiritual teacher Alan Watts frequently suggested that our deepest suffering comes from believing we are isolated individuals, separated from life itself. In his book, The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are, Watts argued that the ego is more like a social mask than our true nature. When that illusion begins to dissolve, life no longer feels like a fragile possession that must constantly be protected. Suddenly, death appears less like annihilation and more like returning to the larger whole from which we came. This is one reason why ego death can feel both terrifying and profoundly liberating. During the process, it often seems as though everything familiar is collapsing. Your ambitions may lose their urgency. Your old identity may no longer fit. The future you spent years constructing may seem strangely unimportant. To the ego, this feels like dying. Spiritually, however, something else is happening. A deeper awareness is quietly emerging beneath the noise of the personality. Psychologist Steve Taylor, senior lecturer in psychology at Leeds Beckett University, has written extensively about awakening experiences that often follow periods of intense psychological crisis. In his research summarized in Extraordinary Awakenings, Taylor found that many people emerge from profound identity collapse with less anxiety about mortality, greater compassion, and an increased sense of connection with all life. Rather than becoming detached from living, they often become more appreciative of every ordinary moment. Ironically, accepting death often teaches us how to live. Many contemplative traditions have understood this for centuries. In Buddhism, reflecting on impermanence is not intended to create despair but freedom. In Christian mysticism, dying to the old self allows a deeper spiritual life to emerge. In Hindu philosophy, the false self gradually gives way to the eternal self, Atman. Although these traditions use different language, they point toward a remarkably similar insight. What is most real about you cannot be destroyed simply because the ego changes or dissolves. Of course, this does not mean spiritually awakened people become reckless or wish for death. Quite the opposite. Most discover a greater reverence for life. When you stop clinging to every outcome, relationships become more genuine. Love becomes less possessive. Success becomes less about proving yourself. Even suffering begins to reveal unexpected lessons instead of appearing as meaningless punishment. This may be the hidden gift of ego death. It does not remove life's uncertainties. It changes your relationship with them. As the ego loosens its grip, the fear of losing everything gradually weakens, because your sense of identity is no longer built upon temporary roles, achievements, or possessions. You begin to experience yourself as awareness participating in life, rather than a separate self desperately trying to control it. Perhaps that is why so many people describe ego death not as the end of who they are, but as the first time they truly meet themselves. Conclusion. The fading fear of death is rarely about becoming emotionally numb or intellectually convinced that everything will be fine. Instead, it often reflects a profound spiritual shift in identity. Ego death invites us to recognize that while the personality changes, the deeper awareness beneath it remains. When we stop identifying exclusively with the ego, death loses much of its power to terrify, because we are no longer defending something we believe can be completely erased. In that sense, the unexpected gift of ego death is not simply freedom from the fear of dying. It is finally discovering how to live with greater peace, presence, and trust.